Trapped in the darkness. Squish, squish. Jara's toes stuck to the mud that she and Amisa were mixing with their feet. They treaded up and down on the water, straw, and dirt that made the hard, durable bricks the Egyptians demanded. They had been working for hours with no breaks even for water. Sweating profusely, Jara felt the moisture dripping from her body. She felt that she could faint from heat and weariness. Jara's throat felt as dry and hot as an oven, and she would have been grateful for even a few drops of refreshing liquid. Amisa's hand clasped Jara's arm, interrupting Jara's wishful daydreaming. Her friend was coughing violently. Amisa had been very pale when she came to work this morning. Jara had asked if she was feeling all right, and Amisa replied that she didn't feel the best but would be fine. However, Amisa had been coughing all day and working slower and slower. Every time Ezra and Lemuel had come to the pit to get more mud to make bricks, they had looked very worried. Ezra seemed loath to leave his sister, even for a few moments. On the last trip he had taken, Ezra had whispered to Jara in passing, "If anything happens with Amisa, I'm close by to help." Jara had nodded in an acknowledgement, and was now beginning to think that she might need Ezra's assistance in getting her friend home. She looked very, very sickly. "Amisa, what's wrong? Do you need to stop?" Jara asked in concern. She put a supporting arm around Amisa's waist. I'm fine," Amisa sputtered. "I can't stop working. The overseer will beat me if I do." Jara's hand strayed to her friend's forehead. "Amisa, you're burning up with a fever. We have to get you home, and quickly." "What's going on here?" A stern voice sounded over Jara's head. At the edge of the sandpit above the girls, an Egyptian overseer stood, his shadow towering over them. "Sir, my friend is very ill. She must go home at once," Jara declared. "I say who goes home, and when," the overseer snorted. "Now get to work, and speed up the process. You both have a lot more work to do before nightfall." "Yes, sir," Jara replied meekly. The man continued to watch them closely. Amisa tried her hardest to keep up with Jara's quick feet, but she soon collapsed from fatigue. Jara tried to pull her up, but Amisa sank deeper into the mud. "Come on, Amisa, get up," Jara urged. "Get up, girl. Hurry up with it, or I'll have to use my whip," the overseer threatened. Amisa struggled to rise, but every effort seemed to drain more strength from her body. Her eyes were glazed over with pain and exhaustion. "Amisa!" Ezra came running towards them as fast as he could through the thick mud. "Ezra, she's very sick. We need to bring her home." "Back off, girl, and you too, boy. Your nation causes enough trouble with these plagues without being lazy on the job. As long as the girl can stand, she'll work. Now get back, or I'll teach all three of you a lesson." The overseer drew his arm back to deal a strong blow with his whip. "Stop it! Leave them alone!" Ezra yelled in desperation. His face was glowing with passion as he quickened his speed to reach Jara and Amisa. Suddenly a strong, chilling wind sprang up. The land grew dark as if the sun was covered by an ominous cloud. What's that? A sandstorm?" The Egyptian turned to see what was happening. It wasn't a sandstorm, or even a rain cloud that obscured the sun's light. It was something much more terrible. Above them, a wall of thick blackness, like a curtain, spread out as far as the eye could see, and it was descending down towards the ground. "What is it? What's going on?" Shouts of confusion and terror filled the air. "It's another plague! Run for your lives!" An Israelite man yelled above the other noises surrounding Jara, Amisa, and Ezra. The soldiers and overseers started to panic. All Egyptians feared the darkness. In fact, the main idol they worshipped was the sun god, Ra, who supposedly gave them their light. Prayers and cries to Ra were heard through the shouts of anguish from the Israelites. Jara's heart was pounding. How could they avoid this plague? What was the darkness? And how could they get back to Goshen with Amisa being so weak? "Come on, we need to get out of here now," Ezra exclaimed. He began to pull Amisa from the mud. "Help me!" he cried to Jara. Together they pulled Amisa to her feet and then half carried, half dragged her towards Goshen. Eaton and Lemuel soon caught up with them, and Eaton picked Amisa up in his arms. They ran as fast as they could, but the darkness was enveloping everything around them. "There, we're almost there," Lemuel encouraged. In a moment they stepped into Goshen. The wall of blackness stopped right at the outskirts of the Israelites' land. The group stood as if stunned. What had just happened? Jara's eyes darted around. The thick curtain of blackness rose on every side of them, encircling the land of Goshen. Miles away, Jara could see the darkness rising up in the distance. The sunlight shone brightly where the Israelites' land lay, but everything else was covered in blackness. Yahweh had made it night everywhere but in Goshen. The darkness was so thick that she couldn't see 5 feet into it, and the only sound Jara could hear were very faint cries and screams. The whole group stood there, panting hard from exertion and staring at the black wall for several long minutes. "Praise Yahweh," Eaton finally whispered in awe. A grin began to spread across Lemuel's face. Before it was the Israelites who were trapped. Now it's the Egyptians who are trapped." Everyone suddenly felt relieved and laughed aloud. Even Amisa managed a weak giggle. The only one who didn't join in the laugh was Ezra. "We shouldn't be rejoicing in the Egyptians' calamity," Ezra said, a little sternly. Suddenly, his handsome face was as white as marble as he stared ahead of him, not seeming to hear or see anything. "Ezra, what's the matter?" Jara asked in alarm. Ezra stood frozen for almost a full minute, then muttered hoarsely, "Adah's in there." In the palace, a few days later, Adah walked slowly and silently through the dark corridors. In her hand, she held a lamp filled with oil, but the flame could barely penetrate the thick blackness. For a very, very long time, Adah had hardly left the queen's side. No one had dared to move, and everyone had been hoping, praying that this perpetual nighttime would just melt away, but it would not. "Yahweh, please keep me strong. Help me be able to encourage the Egyptians, especially the queen, and the other Israelites here," Adah whispered in a barely audible voice. A vision of the queen's face flitted through Adah's mind. The queen did not like the dark, and being in the pitch blackness was incredibly trying to her. She had torches and lamps all around her room, creating a small, warm glow. Unfortunately, the blackness was so heavy and thick that it weighed down on everyone. Adah stopped at a fork in the corridor. Which way was the kitchen? She was going there to try to get something for the queen's refreshment. "I think it's this way," she reassured herself, but she still felt rather frightened, small and alone. The air was so thick that her voice didn't echo through the hallways like it usually did. She couldn't even hear the thwop, thwop, thwop of her sandals against the cool marble floor. It also took great effort to breathe the stifling air. A faint glimmer of light shone in the distance. It looked like several torches bobbing up and down. A group of soldiers or servants? Adah peered into the darkness, trying to see who was approaching her. She felt a distinct feeling of dread rising within her. Thoughts of being almost murdered went through her mind. In a moment she saw a group of 6 guards surrounding a boy and an older man. Adah quickly stepped aside, bowing low. It was Ramesses the heir, with his tutor, Panj. "Who's that?" one of the guards demanded, raising a light to reveal Adah's face. "I'm Adah, the queen's personal attendant. I'm going to the kitchen to get food for the queen." The guard grunted approval and prepared to move on when someone called out, "Wait!" Prince Ramesses stepped forward. Adah curtsied low, head bowed in reverence. When she lifted her head, she met the prince's dark eyes. She read in them despair and worry and concern. Though the prince's front was strong, Adah sensed his need for a true friend, a true god. "Adah, how's my mother? I haven't seen her in weeks. I'm worried about her." "She's well, your majesty. A little weary and nervous, but unharmed. Thank you for asking about her." The prince opened his mouth as if he wanted to say more, but Panj placed a hand on Ramesses' shoulder. "My lord, your father requested your presence in the throne room immediately. I don't think we should keep him waiting." Adah and Ramesses both nodded and exchanged a wordless but knowing look. They both knew that the pharaoh was not in a good mood and was easily angered. "Of course," Ramesses said with a slight sigh. "Good day, Adah." The prince and his bodyguards swept away in the darkness as Adah continued down the hallway. Finally, up ahead, Adah saw a tiny gleam of light. She almost instantly found herself up against a wooden door and opened it. The door led into the kitchen. There were torches all about the kitchen, giving it some light, but even here it was still dark and the air thick. Tahara and an Israelite slave named Abilene were cooking some type of meat. Finally, someone had the courage to come out in this blackness, Tahara mumbled, irritated. "I came to get some refreshment for the queen," Adah explained for her sudden appearance. "Do you have anything that I can take to her?" "Yes. We have just finished cooking some duck, and we have some bread and a bit of fruit left." "Abilene, go get the bread from the pantry," Tahara ordered. "Yes, ma'am," Abilene replied meekly. She was back in a moment with a reed basket. In it were a few pieces of bread and some figs. Tahara added the duck to the basket and handed it to Adah. "Thank you very much," Adah said. She left the kitchen, closing the door behind her before she endeavored to make her way back through the blackness. To her surprise, as she walked down one corridor, she saw a light coming in her direction. She drew in her breath and tried to flatten herself against the wall, hoping that she would not be seen. Her heart was pumping as fear seeped back into her body. Her chest tightened. She tried to still her heavy breathing, but to no avail. Adah also realized that there was not enough room in the hallway for whoever it was to get past her, and they had probably already seen her lamp. Quickly she decided to just talk to the person outright and find out who it was. "Who's there?" Ada asked, a slight tremble in her voice. "Ada?" a voice questioned in surprise. Ada exhaled in relief, for by now she knew that voice well. It was the voice of Pocky, her fiancé. "Oh, thank goodness," Ada whispered. "What are you doing here alone?" Pocky demanded, coming up closer so that his light reflected off of her face. "I came to get some food for the queen," Ada replied. "Why didn't you ask me to go with you?" Pocky persisted. "You know it's not safe for you to be by yourself in the palace, especially under these circumstances." "I didn't know where you were," Ada muttered. "I'm sorry." "It's all right," Pocky replied, relaxing somewhat. "I'm just glad you didn't get hurt. But you must remember that I need to be with you if you have to go anywhere. The queen has ordered me to accompany you at all times." "I will try," Ada promised. Then she added, "But I know that Yahweh will protect me. He controls whether I live or die." There was a cold silence. Then Pocky suggested, a little roughly, "Let's head back." He took Ada's lamp and held his torch and the lamp out in front of them. For a while silence reigned. Ada was still not quite comfortable with this pagan. He was a good friend to her, but nothing more. Though he was definitely kind and generous to everyone, Ada knew that he was a pagan, sacrificing to the Egyptian statues and paying no heed to Yahweh. If Ada had to be married to an Egyptian, there was no other one that she would prefer. But this man was nothing compared to Eaton, and Ada knew that she would never be able to truly love this man the way she should love a husband. No matter how hard Ada tried to keep her thoughts and desires to love centered around Pocky, it seemed that she could never stop thinking about Eaton. She had hoped that someday they would be able to marry. Now, that wasn't even a possibility. Eaton had all the character qualities she had always wished for in a husband, and he believed in Yahweh. Pocky barely had half of those character qualities, and he didn't honor Yahweh in the least. "Ada," Pocky broke her train of thought, "it bothers me that you put so much confidence in your invisible God. You say that he will protect you, but that gives you no reason to put yourself into danger." "I don't try to put myself into any unnecessary danger. I just said that my God controls whether I live or die. He has a plan and a purpose for my life, and nothing can happen to me but what he allows," Ada replied confidently. "But how? How can a God that you cannot even see control you? How can he be powerful, and how can you know him when you can't even see him?" Pocky argued. "Well, right now you can't see your gods, and they don't appear to be much help to you in these circumstances," Ada retorted gently. "Egypt became a great nation because Yahweh blessed this land by Abraham's descendant, Joseph. Your Pharaoh doesn't even acknowledge Joseph, the one who Yahweh used to save your people from the great famine and bring all of Egypt under the Pharaoh's control. He has hardened his heart against Yahweh and Yahweh's people. And if I ever doubted that he is true, all of these plagues have shown me that he really cares for us and that he really does exist." "How many times do I have to tell you this?" Pocky exclaimed exasperatedly. "Ada, it's not your God, but our gods who are angry with us. It's our gods who are trying to show us something, but Pharaoh doesn't know what it is. Ada, I love you, but you must learn to love and trust our gods. It will be hard on our marriage when we believe in two different things." "I cannot, Pocky," Ada said quietly but firmly. "Why?" Pocky questioned defensively. "Because we, people, are made in Yahweh's image. Just look at the gods you have made. Most of them look like sick combinations of man and other creatures the true God has made. Snakes are sacred to you. We know that the serpent who caused the fall of our father Adam has been trying to displace Yahweh since the beginning of time. You raise up Pharaoh, a man, as if he is a god, but you say yourself that it's his behavior that's keeping the gods from being appeased. You are all so confused. Yahweh cannot be manipulated. He does what he pleases, and he has been patient with you because of his loving kindness. But he told our father, Abraham, that he would bring his descendants back to the land he had shown to him, and there's nothing your gods, or Pharaoh, can do to stop him, because he is almighty. He controls the wind, the rain, the weather, and all parts of this earth. He is real, true, and just. There is no other God. I cannot deny him. I don't know if I'll be one of the Israelites that Yahweh brings back to the promised land. He has his own purpose, and he does not answer to me. But I know that he's the true God and is good and just. Perhaps he will leave me in Egypt to help you and the other Egyptians understand who he truly is. I'm at peace with my Maker, and whatever he tells me to do, I will do. Why don't you try trusting in Yahweh? Then maybe you will see and understand why I have such peace and confidence in my invisible God." Paki was silent. Ada knew that he had nothing more to say to defend his beliefs. She also realized that what she had said had been very bold, maybe too bold. If the pharaoh came to know about what she had just been sharing with Paki, she could be killed. Ada gulped, hoping, praying that Paki would respond well and not report her to Pharaoh. "I'm sorry for becoming angry at you, Ada. I'll consider what you said about your God," Paki responded quietly. Ada's heart leapt for joy. His heart was softening. She could tell that there was a tone in Paki's voice that she had never heard before. Maybe Yahweh wanted her here so that she could lead Paki to a love and knowledge of him. "Here you are," Paki said as his hand turned the handle of the door between two guards leading into the queen's chambers. Ada thanked him gratefully for escorting her. "It was nothing," he said with a smile. "It's a good thing I know my way around so well, especially during this time of darkness. I'm just glad I'm able to run errands for people." Paki headed off in another direction as Ada entered the queen's apartment. Torches and lamps hung all about the richly furnished room, but as in all the other rooms it was still dark and the air hung thickly. Lexine and the Egyptian maid by the name of Moselle sat in a corner doing the little mending that could be done in such dim light. The queen lay stretched out on her cushioned bed, restless and uneasy. The queen always liked to have something to do, whether it was ordering her servants around, making sure everything was flowing smoothly in the palace, visiting other royalty and nobility, or going down to the Nile to see what things were being imported from other countries. The queen hated being locked up in her room and wished there was something she could do to amuse herself. "Here, my queen, I've brought you some bread and meat." Ada set the basket by the queen's side and took out the delicacies. "Thank you, Ada." The queen smiled with pleasure. "You are a constant source of happiness to me. I don't know what I would do if you weren't here. Being cramped up here is torture." The queen lifted the water to her lips. Ada felt a twinge of sadness. The queen was so attached to her. If they were ever to be free, Ada felt sure that she would be kept in Egypt to serve the queen and be married to Paki. But what other choice did she have? The queen ate in silence. Ada sat by her side, her hands folded calmly in her lap, thinking over the events of the last few days. The queen didn't finish all of her food and spoke to Ada. "Now you and the others should eat something too, to keep up your strength." Ada divided the food between the two other maids and herself, and when the meal was over, they all felt satisfied. Ada went back to the queen's side, and the queen, leisurely propping herself up against her pillows, commanded, "Talk to me, Ada. I want something to entertain me. It's terrible not being able to do anything but sit here in this blackness." "What would you like to hear about, my queen?" Ada asked, ready to gratify the request. There was a pause, and then the queen spoke almost tentatively. "Tell me some more about your God. It is very obvious to everyone in the palace that you possess a sort of peace that none of us have in this time of trial. Is it your God who gives you this peace, this tranquility?" Ada's face lit up with joy. The queen rarely mentioned Yahweh. In fact, she hadn't allowed Ada to even mention Yahweh for over a month now. Maybe her heart was being softened, just like Paki's. "Yes, my queen. I do believe that the real reason I'm at peace is because I have given the God of the Hebrews my life. Whenever I give my all to him, I know that I'm making him happy, and I feel happier in return. Yahweh has blessed me and protected me thus far, and I know that it's because I've trusted him completely, not just with what happens around me, but with my very life. And that's why you don't seem very worried about this darkness, or about the danger that surrounds you from the other Egyptian servants here." Ada nodded her head. "Yes, my lady." The queen sighed remorsefully. "I wish I could have such peace and confidence in our gods as you seem to have in yours. Our gods never give me peace or joy. Sometimes they even frighten me. I'm not quite sure what to do. It seems that we can never appease them. But tell me this, is it your God or our gods who are causing all these plagues and troubles to come upon us?" "Well, my mistress, I believe that it's our God that is sending all of these troubles. We know how majestic and powerful he is, and we have been praying to him for help and deliverance. I believe that he is finally answering our prayers. It would seem that he is afflicting your people because you will not let us go." "You mean my husband will not let you go?" the queen interrupted sharply. "Oh, there are many Egyptians who would very willingly send your people away. They have been advising my husband to send your nation away for quite some time. And does he listen? No. Would you like him to send us away if it's Yahweh who's causing all of these trials?" Ada questioned. "Well, I'm not sure really. I would like to keep you and your nation here, but I believe that my husband has been wrong in treating your people so terribly. I wish that you could just live here and run your own lives like your people used to in the olden days. But if the only way to please your God is to let your nation go, I don't see that we have any other choice." The queen lapsed in silence, contemplating what to do. For a while, Ada didn't know what to say. She finally ventured hopefully. "Would you like me to tell you something more about Yahweh?" "No, no, not now," the queen said absently. She seemed to be thinking hard. The queen lay still for several minutes. Then she quickly sat up and commanded, "Ada, go get my finest dress and crown, and get out my most ornamental wig and makeup." "Yes, my queen." Ada got up quickly to obey, but her face held a puzzled expression. "I'm going to see my husband," the queen said determinedly, answering Ada's silent question. "If your God really does answer prayers, you should say one to him right now. I'm going to beg Pharaoh to let your people go." "Knock, knock," Jara called cheerfully. She peered into Amisa's open doorway and was quite pleased to see her friend propped up into a sitting position with some coarse woolen blankets. Ezra sat by his sister's side, holding her hand gently. Amisa's eyes brightened at the sight of Jara. She smiled, and Jara was relieved to see that the color had returned to her friend's cheeks. "Come in," Amisa said eagerly. Ezra rose from the stool and offered it to Jara. She nodded at him and took the vacated seat. Ezra headed out the back door toward the small shade tree. "How are you feeling?" Jara asked. "Much better, thank you. The fever broke this morning. I suppose that I will be up and about in just a few days," Amisa replied with a small grin. "I'm so glad," Jara exclaimed in earnest. "Here, I made this for you." Jara produced a hidden sweetbread from the basket she had brought along. "I know this is your favorite." "Oh, how did you know?" Amisa asked breathlessly. She smelled the sweet, sticky scent and sighed contentedly. "Now there's nothing that could make my day better, except—" Amisa paused abruptly. "Except what?" Jara prodded. Amisa's eyes glazed over with tears, and she focused her gaze on the dirt floor. "It's Ada, isn't it?" Jara answered for her friend. "Yes. We haven't heard anything from her, and it's been 5 days," Amisa said between sobs. She swallowed hard, still averting Jara's gaze. "I'm sure she'll be all right," Jara soothed, patting her friend's cool hand, but even she didn't feel convinced. "Has your father done anything to try and locate her?" Both the girls started at this sudden question. Eaton was standing right behind Jara's shoulder. He must have come in unobserved by the two girls and had overheard their conversation. Amisa shrugged her shoulders and brushed a stray strand of hair back from her forehead. "Father says it would be hopeless. We would never be able to find our way into the palace, much less locate Ada." Amisa released the tension from her shoulders and tried to regain her composure. She inhaled deeply and then smiled weakly up at Eaton. "Is her life in great danger?" Urgency rose in Eaton's voice. I hope not. Father and Ezra are concerned, but they don't seem to be too worried. Pocky and the queen are protecting her, and Yahweh knows that she's there too." There was a long pause. Everyone's thoughts were focused on Ada, wondering if she was still alive. No one knew what was happening in the darkness or what Ada was doing. Just then some sweet, lively strains of music floated into the house. Ezra's flute. As that thought crossed Jara's mind, she felt a calming peace flood over her. Amisa appeared to feel it too, and she seemed to be relaxing. "Is there anything I can do for Ada?" Eaton asked, though the question didn't seem to be pointed to anyone in particular. "No." Amisa drew a long breath. "Only Yahweh can help her now." Amisa looked deeply into Jara's eyes and then squeezed her hand. "I'm sure Yahweh is watching out for her and that you'll hear from Ada very soon," Jara assured her friend, in a much more forceful tone than she felt. "I hope you're right," Amisa replied, doubt foremost in her tone and look. "Jara, we need to go back home. Mother needs us," Eaton said. "I'm glad you're feeling better, Amisa." "Thank you, Eaton, and thank you, Jara, for your quick visit. You have encouraged me more than you'll ever know. Oh, and Eaton? Thank you for carrying me when I didn't have the strength to stand." Amisa lowered her eyes, ashamed. Eaton nodded slightly. "You're welcome," he murmured. "I'm glad we were a blessing to you," Jara said with a forced smile. She gave Amisa's hand one more gentle squeeze, then left the house with Eaton. His countenance was dark, as if overshadowed by a cloud. "He's worried about Ada," Jara thought, "and he probably should be." Then she prayed silently, "Yahweh, please protect Ada and help her family have peace in you."